Okay, hello and welcome everybody to this talk today, Technology and Education, How to Adapt Curriculums Offers to Train Future Generations. Please, if you want to come on stage, Tobia and Alberto. Yes, masks off. At least here on stage we can we can brief a little bit. If you feel too close to each other, you can move a little bit. It's okay. It's nice that you that you want to be close, but
An Italian and a Spaniard in a
yeah,
stage.
exactly. Too many Southern Europeans on stage. We all want to be close. Okay, then. So the idea is we got a very ambitious title for for today's panel. So we're gonna try to approach it in a broad way and give some insights to a broader public, and then dive a little bit deeper into what the future will look like. But first thing first, I'd like to thank both of you for taking the time for being here, Tobia and Alberto. And maybe let's start with a very brief intro about yourselves and why should people care about your opinion on this topic.
Thank you, Davide. And I think just wanted to start by thanking Esade for bringing us here. It's really, really cool to be here. So my name is Alberto. I run an organization called Transcend Network, and we help early stage founders in the future of learning, the future of work. So very relevant to this conversation. And we've worked with about 150 founders in the last couple of years. We now run this founder fellowships and a fund. So a lot of the things that I'll be saying are coming from talking to hundreds of founders. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Davide, for inviting. I'm excited to share the stage with you, Alberto. This is my first time after COVID. I think like with so many
For many of us
people,
as well, yeah.
I have to notice my heart rate has gone up like emotion. Like, oh my God, how many? My name is Tobia De Angelis. I'm CEO and co-founder of Strive School. I'm so sorry. Okay. My name is Tobia De Angelis. I'm CEO and co-founder of Strive School. We are a Y Combinator-backed company. We're building the future of online technology education. What does it mean is we train people to become software engineers and data scientists through an online, very intense program, similar to physical boot camps, but fully remote. We started a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, and grown really fast since then. We're probably the fastest growing company. I had a big announcement here today, but I cannot do it for
Oops.
legal reasons, but hopefully in a few days. But yeah.
So stay tuned.
Hopefully stay tuned.
We'll share the contacts as well at the
Yeah.
end, so people can
Yeah.
stay tuned, and hopefully very soon you can publicly share this big, interesting announcement. Okay. Now, both of you're running remote first or remote based programs. So you are your companies both are by design working remotely, and so you've been fully accustomed to what has been going on in the last years. Nevertheless, we've all experienced some changes that forced onto some people the adoption of new technologies. Now, some things are rather obvious to most of people and became very common. Now we're all using these remote communication tools. We're all spending a lot of time on Zoom and other video conferencing tools, as well as chat communities. But beyond that, is there any, from the technology point of view, is there anything that you've seen in the last, let's say, 2-3 years emerging very rapidly that you'd like to as well comment about, that you think it's interesting and maybe going to stay with us in the future?
I think one of the main changes that we've seen in the last couple of years is that the organizations that are getting started in EdTech are going from, or let's say, a university or a school that moves their classes online to organizations like Strive School that are built for online. And I think I think about it as like, if you're training for a sport, if you're training a professional athlete to play in a football pitch, you have to do a very different training than if you're training somebody to become an esports player, right? And I think that's kind of the main shift, honestly. There's not that much of a tech change. It's just it takes a very different type of learning experience to work online. So honestly, I think that's the main change. We're seeing that everybody has experienced online learning in the last couple of years, but what we're seeing now is just totally experiences that are fully designed for that medium. And I think that's honestly the main change.
Yeah, I mean, we run a kind of fully distributed school since a few weeks before COVID. So the idea was like, nobody's doing online education only. We're gonna be the only one. So yes, and things change, but generally, as always, like you start from doing what you know to do, like offline, and people try to copy one-to-one exactly what they were doing in classes. Of course, this doesn't work. How many here feel very engaged in an online conference? Very engaged, like in an online conference, you feel very engaged. Like
We have one person.
one person, right? So I think generally like that's the main challenge.
We're gonna
A lot
ask
of-
you later.
yeah, a lot of tools are trying to like solve that problem, but yeah, I would say like generally speaking, the best thing ever happening to like education was probably Zoom, to some extent, and even the worst thing happening to online education was exactly also Zoom. So I think like that's
Yeah.
the main point to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so as you mentioned, engagement. It's a it's very big topic, and it's something that we working thinking more from the university point of view. It's something that we've all been working a lot on. You as well, I think. Is there anything that you've been designing specifically now, thinking about Strive School, for example? As you mentioned, this was thought from the beginning prior to COVID to be a fully remote distributed school. So what do you do in terms of engagement? Is there any strategy you're using?
Yeah, that's a great question because the real answer is no. Like we haven't figured that out yet. We're trying so many things. What we have seen is there's really nothing that works if you try to like engage people online as if they're offline. Like people try events, they don't work. We try to use gaming. We have a culture of memes inside the company, which I know it's weird, but memes really play well online. So we have like meme moments where we share a lot of memes and the whole community shares memes. This may sound super dumb, but in the end it works better than any other thing. So but the answer unfortunately is we have not figured out online engagement yet.
I'm actually going to disagree a little bit with the event
Good.
part. So we run our founder programs fully online, and one of the things we learned was that we couldn't do events online like we do offline. So we figured like basically as soon as somebody joins a Zoom session, there has to be something that's keeping their attention. So they join and there's music blasting. There's music. Everybody's welcoming each other on Zoom. There's like all these little rituals that are meant for short attention spans. So every activity, we don't spend more than 5 minutes speaking in a row. We use breakouts a lot. We use just different activities to keep the Zoom component active. But what I've learned is that Zoom experience has to be an extension of your culture as a school or as an organization. So I think Tobia is being humble by saying that they haven't figured it out. Like there's probably a lot of things about the culture of working with each other, which I think is a very important part of Strive School, the peer learning component that is being moved online. So I think there's a couple of things that we're learning slowly.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of the things that I feel we need to do a better job as an industry of EdTech of documenting what's working for online environments. I think there's still very little kind of sharing lessons between what's working at a university, at a boot camp, or an online community like ours.
Yeah. Can I add something to that?
Please.
Yeah, I think like the biggest difference is when you go to university. How many here went to university? Phenomenal.
Good.
How many here remember a specific class, or how many here remember more as a best thing that ever happened to you in university, a moment with like your friends at a party, like none in the class, like outside the class, like who's the class team, who's outside the class team? Okay,
Good.
so everyone goes to university for a different reason than learning. Like learning is 1%, 99% is like you meet friends, you go out, you become a citizen of the world, like all of these things. the big problem with like online communities is you do not have all this other part, right? Nobody has figured that out. So the secret for us, and I wasn't being humble, I was just like being a little bit playful, but the secret for us is we run a community where people have a very clear purpose and a very clear goal. People wake up in the morning, they want to become excellent software engineers and data scientists. That's what motivates them, and that's what keeps them engaged. I think the difficult part is if you run a community or a school with no clear purpose, like we like each other and we spend time together, online doesn't work. Offline works really well. So the big issue is, what are we doing here, right? If you have an answer, you can run an amazing program, an amazing school. If you don't have an answer, that's going to be tough.
So I think we should be playing to the strengths of online learning, right? One of the really cool things about being able to learn stuff online is that we can now work and at the same time learn. We might be able to get an online university degree while we're working. This is actually in the US, which has a lot of data in this regard. The fastest growing sector of university students are working adults. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. This is what online learning was meant to accomplish. So I think it's fine that people are going to specific places to learn a very specific thing, and they're not spending the whole day at a university campus. We're unlocking a bunch of different new things.
Yeah, and thanks to both, because you gave me the perfect segue. What I'd like to do is now zoom out a little bit from the more kind of tactical way of delivering content to actually what is delivered, right? What is the structure of the education programs, which is as well a little bit more the focus of the talk. And so, do you think there is a misalignment between the way that, let's say, traditionally, so more institutional education, the way it is offered, to what the students, the learners need? And so now, if you want to say it differently, are the current existing curricula from universities, now focusing on higher education for a moment, aligned with the needs of the learners, or do you think there is a misalignment, and if so, why?
I think there's a fundamental problem in education, which is that often the buyer is not the same person as the user. So when you ask how many people have gone to university, a bunch of people, we raise our hands. We probably didn't pay it ourselves. It was probably a family that was saving some money for some time. And I think one of the reasons why change is so difficult in education to me is because of that precisely. If you are a university or a school that's receiving tuition from students, really after the student pays, you don't have an incentive to give them a job or to like really understand what they want. And that's a really tough truth. But I think sometimes we haven't quite found a model of learning and of tuition and paying for education that allows for the needs of the learner to always go first. But I think there's institutions that really want to change and really need to change. I think Esade, for example, strikes me as an organization that they're very established as a university, and as a business school, but they want to change things. So I really hope that over the next few years we really see education getting a lot weirder in a way. Like education is about to enter a very weird stage of very short-term, very blended experiences, and I think that's a really wonderful thing.
Because now, if I can jump in for a moment, there is this, as you mentioned, there is this tension in a way between the value of the brand and the tradition of university, like Esade or many others that have, in a way, big part of the reason why people join is because of the brand, and that brand has been established by being consistent over many years, versus the fact that the needs are not so consistent anymore. And so kind of there is a tension there in between. How do you structure the offering then?
And what I'm really trying to do is send an alley-oop to Tobia, who has a very different business model that I think is what we're seeing in the last couple of years, right? Like serving the student directly, which I think is a big change.
Yeah, we're doing few crazy things, but asking people to pay for education in Europe is, the craziest thing. First thing everyone says is like education is free in Europe, which is true. And I don't disagree with that, and it's amazing to some extent. I think the problem is with every free things, there is a problem of like, as Alberto was saying, when you buy something, it has to come with a specific ROI, right? Like you buy something as an investment, right? Like you don't buy if we go to a restaurant, that's consumption, that's leisure. Doesn't matter. We pay $50. It's an amazing food. We go home a little drunk and we're happy. But if you go for like education, it should be something that gives you back a career, right? I think that's the investment. You give them some time, it gives you back a career. There is already a discussion in Europe, I think, and in my country as well, in Italy, like, professors already say no, education is not about the jobs and it should learn you to think. Now, my pitch to that is like, if you cannot think that education should have an ROI, we have a problem. Like how's it possible, right? Like after 5 years, you haven't understood that you should have an ROI. That's difficult. I think that's a struggle already. We're trying to solve it by employing a model where you only pay kind of a very tiny part at the beginning of the program. If you come in the school and we select you, you only pay a deposit, and then you pay the vast majority of the tuition once you get hired. This basically aligns all the operation needs. The whole company knows, teachers know that we are here to get people placed after. Like the whole company is very aligned into like getting people hired, right? The whole curriculum is built in a way that gets people hired. The whole structure of the company is lean so that we can get people hired at a lower cost. We don't run bloated programs for like 3 years to keep you in a school. Like, we want to get you out fast, but not faster. Like, unlike most boot camps, which are like, 6 weeks and you're done. Like, not possible. Like, for us, it's 6, 7, 8 months. You become a kind of quite good, solid engineer. We go out, we place you, we start making money. So the whole thing is organized in this way. And I think we have a business model incentive. If we do not do it, we die. I have to find myself a real job, and I really don't want to do it. So, I think in this way, we keep ourselves alive. But when you see like a lot of schools, I don't know how it works in Spain, but when you see a lot of public schools that get funded directly from the government, there is no checking really into like how many people they get hired. There is no accountability in that. There is no change in funding. If you get, if your faculty has 10% placement or 80% placement, I think all of that creates a problem, right? Because then a lot of kids, they go into the wrong faculties. They don't understand that they're doing that. And then after 5 years, they have to come to us and we do, the last 6 months, and then we put them in a job. So like the whole thing is a little bit wrong, but we're trying to fix it.
Right. So you have as you said, you have a very specific model. You say, hey, we promise you something, and all the incentives are aligned from the beginning. You want a certain type of students that are looking for something. You say, we deliver something. And the way you build the incentive structure for your company, yourself, and the people working there is all aligned towards one objective, which is not what happens in most places. No, I mean, the debate about what is the function of higher university. So finding, I would say, unemployment versus helping people how to think, it's very, very broad. And I'm not sure we can tackle all of that, but surely, there are different angles to see it, and probably different ways. And you're delivering successfully on one specific approach. Now, as you mentioned, you started by saying in Europe it's weird to ask people to pay for school. So, kind of my next point is, as we are moving towards a more and more globalized world in which more people have access to the internet, and people are working remotely, and in a way everything is leveling. How do you see these different models kind of evolving? No, in a way we have like the typical kind of more North American, Anglo-Saxon model that's much more paid for, the European model, other hybrids across the world. What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think about it so much as a cost question. When you look at cost per student from K-12 to university to after that, it's actually fairly similar across countries. It costs a certain amount of money to get somebody to be in a university or a boot camp or whatever, because there are some services that you have to provide. I think the question to me is, I think what Tobia is building is really important. Like we need pathways to jobs for people that know what they want and they can get through a 6-month very intense program. But the reality is that that's not everybody. There's a lot of people that don't know exactly what they want. I would argue a 4-year university degree is probably not a good fit either for them. I think we need to find a way to break down this 4-year university degree into 17 different models that can work to serve all the needs of different students. And I think the bootcamp will be one of those, and it will be a really important one. But I also think about where I was when I joined university. I had no idea what I wanted, and I'm sure a lot of you will relate to this. And I think we need some flexibility for those people that don't know exactly what they need. Some ability to kind of see the whole map and see where they want to go. And to me, this comes down to creating shorter term experiences that are more affordable to everybody, so that not only the very few can access university degrees, and the reality is, even if you're paying, whether you're paying for it or you're not, somebody's paying for that education, and the government cannot pay for university degrees forever. It needs to evolve. So to me, the answer is, in 5 to 10 years, we'll have a lot more sort of well understood and well accepted programs that don't look like a university degree, look like a lot shorter and a lot more specific. And they can state at the beginning of the program, this is exactly what we're going to give you. If you want this, join us and we'll take you here.
Yeah. Like, to second that, I don't know what the future is gonna look like. No idea. My hope, and again, I think you mentioned before, is, so the biggest problem that we have is people are convinced that our programmers, there is a part of the market that thinks that our programmers, are exactly as someone that has a degree in like computer science. Of course, the reality is not true, but there are differences, pros and cons. Like, someone that comes out of our program is a better programmer than 99% of people that come out a computer science degree. But from maybe on the theory side, we are weaker, right? Because they spend a lot of time doing other things. But the biggest problem that we have is we're doing a lot of education towards companies, and telling them, hey, you can hire this person because we have proven, like, we can prove that this person is really good at programming. Programming is a craft. Like, it's like being good at painting. You don't need a degree in arts to be a good painter. Nobody asked Picasso, I'm so sorry, Mr. Picasso, do you have a degree in painting or something? Like, it's the same thing, right? So we know this, but a lot of companies and a lot of HRs and like a lot of like the establishment is like, should I risk my career to hire this like not graduate, kind of graduate of this Stripe school online something? So a lot of the thing is, we need, like, at the forefront, we know that things are gonna get a lot weirder with very weird programs. Alberto, you did Minerva, right? Minerva is this amazing new organization. It has a few years at this point. How many of you know Minerva Education? See, they have to do a better job at branding. But no, jokes aside, but they reinventing education, or like higher education, in a way that it's like super, super cool. But in general, things are gonna get weirder, but we need to do a lot of education about this new education. We need to go talk to like HR people and tell them that, like, hey, you can hire someone with like non-traditional background. It is okay. Until we do that, there's gonna be gatekeeping. And until we have gatekeeping, there's gonna be like, we're not gonna break the mechanism, right? So things gonna get weird, but we need to explain it to like who's the receiving end of the equation.
Yeah, no, and this is what in classical kind of more purchasing, it's been the famous saying, nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Exactly,
yeah. Right? And nobody, like, I second that. It's like no tech person has ever been fired for buying IBM, and no HR person has ever been fired for hiring a CS degree, a CS graduate, right? It's a safe bet. Yeah. We need to change that.
Can
Go ahead.
So, as Tobias said, I graduated from a university that when I enrolled, there were no students. It was called Minerva University, and they were looking for the first cohort students. I joined, and it was really tough to get a job after. So I often joke that, like, there's all this talk about being an entrepreneur. It's like a passion that you've had since you were a child. I became an entrepreneur because I did not have a job. I couldn't find a job. So I think what I've learned is I couldn't prove that I had a credential that had a strong alumni network or anything else. So I had to show a proof of work. We were just talking about this before this. I've most of the stuff that I've accomplished professionally has come from Twitter and just being active on Twitter. We've met on Twitter.
The three of us, I think, we all met on Twitter.
And it's happened because you have to find spaces where you can prove your work instead of proving where you come from. And I think this is very strong in the developer kind of world, where there's a very strong culture of showing your work and asking for your GitHub when you're hiring somebody. And I think we're going to go into that world a lot deeper in the next 10 years, where if you're a writer, you're not going to show your degree in, humanities. You're going to show a proof of work in a way. And I think that's it's something I've personally experienced, and I think we're going to go a lot deeper into in the next 10 years.
Yeah, no, you're bringing up, I think, 2 or 3 very interesting topics. One is the fragmentation, right? You're saying the 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. So multiple years degrees in which people join, mostly because many people don't know what they want, and then kind of have to change halfway through. Probably are gonna will have to change. Maybe they still make sense in a few very specific areas. I wouldn't want, surgery from somebody that studied 6 months, but beyond some very, very specific topics, I think, no. There's one element, which is this fragmentation. The second point is the credentials you're mentioning, right? So how do we certify that somebody, or how do we get past gatekeepers, which is a big topic, right? There are gatekeepers, and in a way you want to help people get past gatekeepers. And so that brings to credential. And I think this has political, but also a more technological point of view, no? Which is, of course, we need to bring in one of the core buzzwords of the moment. So when we say fragmentation, we think about tokenization, right? And so one of the first thing that we've heard as well in many talks during the last days is what role could blockchain play in all of this, right? Does it make any sense? Do we envision fragmenting, so linking the fragmentation and the credential that comes, so the attaching the credential to a blockchain-based system? Do you think it's something that will be accepted now, or will it play a role in the future?
Okay. I think it's obviously a hot topic. Everybody's finding a way to talk about it in every one of these panels. I think there's 2 thoughts that come to mind. Blockchains are good for some problems. For others, they're just very expensive databases. And I think education is still trying to find a way to lower the cost of providing an education for the majority of the world. So I don't think it's going to solve some of the more important problems in the world in education right now. Maybe at some point in the future. I think where I could see there being a role is if you could use some sort of like network of peers that are validating other people's skills. I think that's really interesting because you're kind of going back to this idea of proof of work. I don't know if you need a blockchain for that, but I don't know. LinkedIn couldn't figure it out, right, with endorsements. So maybe Web3 can fix it. I don't think Web3 will go into validating existing university degrees or diplomas. I don't think that's a real problem. But yeah, I guess we're still in the early days.
Alberto is a politician. Like he gave such a. Oh my God, I'm scared. So no, the answer is no. I think that's really like my answer is like anyone pitching that hasn't understood the core technological premise. So no, the answer is just no.
Okay. Following up on this, but changing the point of view, who could be the players? If we say that, again, longer degrees provided by one single entity will disappear or anyway reduce their presence, who will be the players that kind of can fit together in offering this mixed curriculums?
That's a very good question, because I think like that's where probably the next wave of innovation in education comes from. Like there is a like education is really weird because no one has figured out a way to aggregate education. Like we have figured out a way to aggregate anything on the internet. There is an aggregator for everything. There is not an aggregator for universities. Or so like is the biggest market without an aggregator in the world. I think like probably there is healthcare. There is the other one, but like there is no an aggregator. There are a lot of reasons for that. My bet is that we're gonna work on something on those lines. But the reality is that you need to figure out three things. You need to figure out how to convince people to like get on your platform, whatever platform that is, and being able to choose maybe 1 year in this university and 1 other year in this university, and then you have like a mixed curriculum type of stuff. Two, you need to find partners that are willing to do it, and three, you need to convince companies to make sure that then they hire these people. So it is a really tough job all along those lines. But like think about it. The idea of like you wake up, you go on the internet, you figure out a way to like buy 2 years of program when you're like 21, 22. Maybe this program spans out of like 3 continents. You travel the world, you learn a lot of useful things. You make it unique so that when you go to a company, you don't have like exactly the same degree as another million people, but you have something unique. I think all of these things together are really like interesting. It's super interesting. I don't know how to figure that out. If I did, I come here in helicopter, right? And I came here by bus still. So like,
I think Tobias touching on a really interesting point, because when you think about it, most other industries have very strong marketplaces because they have very strong network effects, right? So if you're Uber, you don't really care who takes you from point A to point B as long as they can take you in a car. So the more cars you have in a road in a given network, the better the experience is going to be because it's going to get shorter wait times. It's great. The opposite tends to be true in education, which is that as you have more and more people, you learn actually less, which is kind of weird. But I think this is one of the things that defines the education industry, that there is actually no winners. Like if you look at the biggest companies in education, there may be like $10 billion. Like that, I think the biggest one right now is maybe Coursera or Chegg, or like they're tiny compared to other industries. And so I would actually say there's probably not going to be one winner, and that's probably a really good thing for everybody.
Which kind of brings back to this credentials topic in a way. If somebody is getting the education from different players and maybe more shorter course, maybe there will be many different Strive schools in the future and similar players.
I hope not.
For different topics, maybe and people can choose. And as well, as Alberto was saying, many times somebody that's very young doesn't know what to do, and so there could be more, let's say, horizontal kind of mind opening, if you want, programs to allow people to understand what they want to do, and then some more vertical specialized ones. But then again, it brings back to the problem. Now, how do you prove that? Do you think it's just a change of mentality, as you were saying, in terms of HR or anyway people responsible for hiring? Or is there any other way that kind of this more flexible mixed curricula could become the norm in a way?
Yeah, I would say there's a high level trend in the world right now of like moving away from I can do this thing because it's in a piece of paper, and we're moving towards a world where we're asking like, what can you show me that I can use to understand if you're a good fit? I think the influence of gaming, for example, in education is huge, and it's a really good thing. And yeah, so I would say we're kind of slowly approaching that. I don't know what's going to kind of break the camel's back and like really push us over the edge, but I think it's kind of year by year we're kind of moving closer to that world.
Yeah, I think like on the same lines. I really don't know yet how to crack this. We're trying to figure that out. It's really hard. Like for us, the hope is that we build a brand in the niche of coding. We're moving a lot onto enterprise. We're starting to do like a lot of upskilling also for enterprise mostly to prove that we're good at what we do. We're trying to build tools to make sure that we measure not only the students, but also the teachers, which allows us to scale over time. We're thinking ways to like, open up and become more of a platform. But again, all those things are really tiny compared to your question. I think like my bet is that, I think I don't remember. I think one of Ironhack, which is one of the biggest and OG boot camps, physical OG boot camps, started in Spain. Very good company. One of their alumni, one of the is now CTO at this big Spanish startup called, I think, Capchase, or I don't know if they're in the UK. I think they're valued $500 million or something. They're really big. And I'm sure that, someone that learned to code in a bootcamp, then started a company that now is really, really big, is going to be willing to hire, from non-traditional. So I think the goal is, over time, the percentage of like decision makers in companies that are non-traditional is going to grow, and that's going to have a snowball effect, right? The day you become CEO at, I don't know, 4 years from now, you're going to hire more non-McKinsey people, and and then right? So
yeah. So in our company, we're a very small company. We're about 7 people, but me and my co-founder started it a couple years back, and everybody we've hired after that is either a graduate from Minerva, which is a university, again, with no track record, or a college dropout. And I'm sure it's the same for you. Like, you're not looking at where they studied. You're looking at other things.
Yeah, we look, for example, like culture-wise, like we look for people that had at least one big change in their life. At least one. It doesn't have to be like a career change, just one big change, because in this moment, our segment in terms of customers are people that are changing, right? It could be career change, it could be degree changers. We have people that are like university, that are like, I want to drop out, I hate this, I want to do something else. So I think, like, for us, the idea that we bring on board people that understand change, it's very, very important. They respect change. So yeah, it's the same for us too, in a different way, but it's the same on the same lines.
Yeah, and this one, no, this last point you mentioned, it's something that I'm seeing as well more and more, no? So putting value on the experiential part, not only on the learning. So one thing is the more practical, direct thing. Can you do the thing I'm hiring you to do? Okay, fine. You need to know that. But the other component is, of course, culture fit, but as well, what experiences have you been through in your life, no? Which is a very non-structured approach. And in a way, if we really blend it all in, there's a lot of traveling, no, moving around that comes into the equation, which is not part of what we traditionally consider education, but in practice, when you make hiring decision, it's something that you're both considering.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest company I really respect is EF. They, how many of you know here EF? Great. So for who doesn't know, EF is one of the largest education companies in the world, I guess. I don't know because it's a private company, but a lot of great culture. And Bertil Hult, who started it, is a Swedish guy. He's 80, I think, at this point. He dropped out of university, started this company, convinced that the best way to learn a language was to travel. Today, the idea that you travel to learn a language is normal. Everyone agrees. But back in the days, they thought that the best way was for a kid to learn grammar and, start from grammar, right? Start from grammar. Like, no, I learned English by playing GTA. It was a cracked version. It was a pirated version of GTA on my PlayStation. So it was in English because there was no Italian version. And that's how I learned English, right? So and I guess you all have similar stories for something in your life. So I think, a lot what's happening is that companies and, younger companies, we are all internalizing these ideas that, what's happening in the world and what's happened to your life, it all comes back. And we call it culture because there is no other way to call it.
There's 2 companies that are going through our fellowship right now that I find fascinating because they're leaning into this a lot. One of them is called Ender, and they basically run these competitions for high school students that they have these challenges to build something on Minecraft. And so these students have to work together to build this really massive project on Minecraft. And I don't know if people here have played Minecraft, but to me, it's one of the best educational experiences I've ever had. And you have to coordinate with people. There has to be a leader. Sometimes there isn't one. It's a great learning experience. And there's another company called Factor that is also running this experiences for high school students that are bringing them a lot closer to what it's like to run a company and run a startup. And I don't think the goal is to have them run a startup per se. It's just to learn through those skills that are going to be a lot more applicable to the rest of their life. So,
okay, I don't want to touch on one of the other buzzwords of the moment and of the conference, but you kind of are bringing me to that. So I wasn't planning on it, but Alberto, you're pushing me, so I need to go. So the question is, you talk about virtualized experience, which make me think of metaverse, right? And so the question is, do you think I mean, technically, no, most probably we're going to see more and more technology coming in. We're going to see VR coming in. How much do you think virtualized experiences can, from an educational point of view, be not a substitute, because probably nothing can be, but a very good proxy of a first person, let's say, lived experience in terms of, improving as a person overall?
I run the risk of becoming the politician in this panel. Right now, virtual reality has a couple very specific applications that seem to work really well. So if you're an insurance company and you're sending people to like this massive, like I don't know, a dam or like a massive scaffolding to learn how to do this process, it's very risky. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. So you can just put on a VR headset, and that works really well. There's a couple other applications that seem to be working well, but right now I think the cost structure just doesn't work. Like it takes so much logistics, it takes so much money to get students in a classroom with headsets. My sense is right now it has a pretty limited impact, but we'll see. Maybe it changes.
A politician in the making. Oh God.
Please vote for me in the next.
We'll know what the next step of Alberto
vote
will
for
be.
me. No, I don't have a like. I think like for blockchain, we can say like absolutely not. Stay away from it.
People have bingo cards, by the way. At the end, we'll see who
What?
people have bingo cards. If we check all the
okay.
right buzzwords, somebody's gonna win.
Oh God. No. I mean, I think I don't know. My only like concern is that this metaverse thing. I don't really understand what it is. Like, I think everyone's like, yeah, the metaverse, and I'm like,
Can
I don't know.
people who don't understand the metaverse raise their hand?
yeah, like I don't know what this is about.
Oh, good.
I think it's a rebrand of VR, right? Because after a few years they can't sell VR, so like now it's called metaverse. I don't know. I think gaming can be interesting, but the reality is that it hasn't blown up in gaming as well. There are some companies doing interesting things, as Alberto was saying, for specific situation. I think it's called situational charged learning environments. Like if you need to learn, or like if you need to start learning how to like behave in a specific area, or like something where you cannot be there, you cannot travel there, you need to start figuring that out. But I don't know, like I'm not an expert into VR.
In terms of specific things, I've actually tested yesterday one approach which was actually related to teaching, and so it puts you in front of a class, which if you it's difficult to try, because if you've never been there, the first time you get to assign to teach a class and you find in front of you 100 students sitting down, it's something that's a little bit humbling, and it's a very intense experience. And so, of course, it's not the same, but I just tested the experience and it felt very, very real. So I think in terms of as well trying and teaching, it could be actually very useful.
I think I don't want to like I know Toby and I are fundamentally optimists about the future. Like we
aren't all entrepreneurs optimists?
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah.
You're kind of a psycho.
Yeah.
But I think one point I wanted to make is I think with education, my general heuristic is the simplest and lower cost alternative is almost always going to win when it comes to technology. And I think we run the risk of being a little bit distracted by all this like metaverse, blockchain, AI, when there's a lot of really interesting learning experiences happening on Discords all over the world, on Telegram, on very random places, on Minecraft. And I'm really interested in these because they're low cost, everybody can access them, and I think they're actually a lot more interesting to me than like the metaverse or.
Yeah. So to add on that, I think like just to clarify, everyone's building VR for education. I like you. Blockchain stuff, I like you anyway. I think my problem is what I've learned is being optimist is one thing, but I think if you look in what I look for and also work, I look for specifics, I look for insights, I look for like specifics, right? So if someone comes and like, hey, what do you think of like A plus B? I'm like, I don't know. It seems very top down, very top-down thinking, like now education plus VR. It's a good question, but my approach to that is like, it seems like it doesn't come from an insight, right? What is more interesting is, someone saying, "Oh, I saw 10 people learning in this new way, and they were there on the street doing it, and that's probably there is something more, like there is something interesting." So like the problem is you need to be an optimist, but you also need to have an insight. You need to be definite, right? Otherwise, you become prey of a trend, and then there are companies building things that are not solving anything. They're just following a trend, like a river, right? But you're not a river, like you're not a fish, right? So yeah.
Yeah, the big question always with technology, if it's are you pushing a solution to a problem that's not there just for the sake of technology, or is there really a problem that needs that technology to be solved? No. Going very very far away from technology, actually, there is another thing I want to ask you before we run out of time, and that is, do you think that this fragmentation, this entering of multiple actors on the scene of education, on people not necessarily having to go to a place and stay there for 4 or 5 years to get one degree, is that going to help as well educating or accessing to higher quality education to people in less developed countries?
I don't think it will be the fragmentation. I think I mentioned cost as like probably not the main driver of change. Now I'm going to say in this case it is, because it's one of those things like there's enough food in the world for everybody to be fed, and yet there's hundreds of millions of people that live under the poverty line in hunger. I think we kind of have the same thing in education, right? So we have countries that spend a lot per student, and are able to get that technology and that education out. And then we have all this all these countries where there's perhaps low bandwidth and they can't access, let's say, Coursera videos, or they can't access all these different kind of learning resources. So one of the areas that we are very focused on in our work at Transcend is identifying companies that are using basically low bandwidth solutions to learning. So, for example, if you go to lots of African countries have this like this plan, a mobile plan where you don't actually you're not paying for data, but you're paying for WhatsApp data. So WhatsApp basically includes a minimum access of data. So we're actually working with a couple of companies. One of them is called Fundamate. They're based in South Africa, and what they do is they take all the curriculum in South African schools and they send it to you via WhatsApp, so you can interact with it. You can ask it very specific.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really really interesting. Those types of solutions that are really focused on basically like low bandwidth solutions, I think are going to be really interesting. And I think kind of going to the point of being able to use online learning to create lower cost education is another sure bet. So another organization that I wanted to highlight is called Kibo School. They're based in Nigeria, and they provide I think it's like a 2-year part-time degree in computer science. It's very very focused on peer learning and kind of real solving real problems, and it's something that the average Nigerian 18-year-old can afford. And it takes a lot of technology to be able to get there. It takes a lot of discipline, but I think those are the types of solutions that are going to take us there.
Yeah. Can I? So amazing. What was the name of the first company?
First company is called Fundamate.
Fundamate.
Fundamate. Yeah.
Fundamate. So this is just like a great example of what I meant before. Like, big companies think that the future of education is like VR. Then maybe the future of education is actually what's like some guys figuring out a way to squeeze a university degree into WhatsApp, and maybe not even a university degree. So like, I think the problem is, just as a reminder, whenever something seems too obvious, like whenever something is pushed by a big company, it is very unlikely that's going to be the next big thing. That's not what big companies do. Big companies become big because they figured out something, and then they panic for the rest of their cash flow lifetime to like figure out the next thing, and they don't, and they buy other companies. That's what big companies do, right? So that's a lot the future of education, that I think it's a specific insight, it's a specific thing that you wouldn't have figured out, right? No one here would have figured out. Those guys did, right? It's a very specific insight, and it's a very unique one. And the second thing is, I don't think for VR, I don't know. Like I would say probably not, definitely not for blockchain. But if there is one buzzword that can impact massively and is impacting, is AI for sure. And that is
And
because
now it's bingo. We checked all the main topics.
but that's fair.
I know.
Why? Because it solves a specific problem. It solves a specific problem, which is recommendations, right? We get recommendations on Amazon on what we like. We get recommendations on YouTube, Netflix, da da da. This at least the same principle applies for education. Why should I learn the whole thing when maybe I'm really good already at a few subjects and I don't know some specific subjects? I should focus on those specific subjects. And even in our company, we haven't yet implemented an AI system that allows you to say, hey, instead of doing this for 6 months, all equals, you should probably focus more on these parts and less on these parts. This is very straightforward. It's not even innovative. This is just like logic, right? And but it's probably something that we're gonna see pervading a lot. At least online education is already, but probably more and more and more.
So the point here will be to are you mentioning it in terms of helping people choose kind of the next step, or to customize what they're actually learning?
Yeah, I don't know specifically, but if I had to bet on one of the three buzzwords, I would definitely bet on AI, because it seems to me the one that has more immediate, obvious applications, which probably means it's not innovative enough. But I can see definitely like value in recommended systems, right? Like when I go on Amazon, I like that they show me books that I may want to buy and not like romance novel, which I may not be the most passionate about. So I think that makes sense in every context, and I think it makes sense also in education.
I think the promise of AI in education is a very ambitious one, and it's the idea of bringing personalized learning to the student, which we're really far away from, like very far. If it happens, I think it could be incredible. But I work with a lot of companies that want to get there, and it's really hard. So I would say AI in education right now is mostly being used by sort of administrative tools, so tools that help schools or help they maybe help you find a tutor, and then the tutor has to help you learn. But it's a very, I would say, limited impact in the learning, but it's solving a very real problem. So I actually fully agree with this. I think AI in education AI has reached education. It hasn't yet reached learning, and that's fine. We'll get there, but it's not 4 years from now. It's probably 20 years from now. But
what are the biggest roadblocks there right now? Why is it difficult to actually use it and implement it to reach these more customized programs?
Again, I think if I knew it, I would join Tobia in the helicopter. We would both get here by helicopter.
Same model.
But I would say the main thing that comes to mind is we don't yet know what personalized learning even looks like. So the idea of personalized learning is not new at all. This actually is something that's been there's a great blog post about teaching machines, and it's this lady who's been an EdTech skeptic for a while. Her name is Audrey Waters. And she talks about how learning machines have been a behaviorist kind of utopia for at least 60 years. So when we think about personalized learning, what does that look like? Is it somebody that's giving us the relevant content to learn? That seems to me like a very limited application of learning. To me, I also didn't learn a lot in school. I learned by the experience that I had outside. I learned by talking to my classmates. That is not something that the AI can provide me with. So until we get to kind of clear applications of learning, I don't think AI will be getting there. I think for now it's having a limited impact, but it's probably an important one. And yeah, we'll see in a couple of years.
Okay, I think we are coming to a close. We have a couple more minutes. If there are any questions from the audience for any of the speakers, I think we can get a couple questions. Yes. Do we have a mic, or should I give them mine?
Thank you very much. We are living in a digital society, so that means do we have to have digital skills? How you envision this data-driven society in a data literacy skills? So what kind of data literacy skill it is needed in education?
So sorry, I couldn't listen. I couldn't hear.
I think the question was, what does data literacy
Plays it-
education look like for
Yeah,
this
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of modern
yeah,
world,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Data literacy.
Yeah.
Oh, um, data literacy. I think
Yeah.
like you just need to like kids. They learn by themselves. You know, like I think there is it is more of a problem for older people than for younger people. But you know, I bought my grandmother a smartphone a couple years ago, and you know, she learned very quickly. You know, a lot of like the tools that we use, WhatsApp. She got to the point where she wanted to start making stories on Instagram and Facebook, and I please you know asked her to not do it. So I think the reality is I'm very optimistic about kind of digital literacy, at least on the usage level. What it could be difficult is I don't know if younger people have an idea of the impact on their mental health of actions like sending nudes around. And no, I mean that's true, right? Those things, and I think the literacy for me is that like that at least they are aware of the scale of consequences um, in their lifetime when they're gonna become adults of whatever you know whatever they do now, kids. It's recorded forever, which is very scary. I'm so happy that you know up to my 20s I was off the great brother because you know I'm safe at least up to my 20s. But I think there's a lot of work to do in that sense, but not in the usage sense. I see kids that are fantastic at self-learning, all the basics of digital literacy, if you can call it that way.
But I was focusing more into getting data, cleaning data, analyzing data, communicating data, discuss with data. So for me, data literacy brings this path.
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things is we're so embedded in technology that we assume that a lot of the jobs that exist today use technology. But there was actually a report that came out today that talked about employment, the share of employment that goes into STEM jobs and kind of high technology jobs. And in most of Spain, it's about 10 to 15%. It's closer to 20% here in Catalonia and in Madrid. But in most of Spain, it's actually a tiny fraction. So I think there's actually going to be a massive opportunity for founders and startups that are helping, let's say, lawyers, politicians, not politicians, political analysts, journalists, use data in interesting ways because I think every it's going to be a huge part of every job. Even if you're not technically coding, you're going to have to use some basic programming, some libraries on R or something. I think.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I understood digital literacy, not data literacy. So I went on a rant. But but I agree with him. Like Alberto mentions, like the cost of becoming decent at using data, visualizing, is going really low. You know, I think the latest tools are very simple for anyone to use. So I would say that I'm very bullish on. You know, it's become a Lego almost like task. So thank you so much, and I'm so sorry.
Hi. So, okay, I'll make this quick. So I work at a university, a large university in the UK, where actually we've been doing blockchain credentialing for a number of years. My question is, if you had a magic wand, okay, I'll start again.
Thank you so much.
So I work at a university in the UK, where we've been doing blockchain credentialing for a number of years.
I lost the customer.
But I'm not going to ask about. If you had a magic wand and you could make any change to the education sector, what would you ask for?
My magic wand would be that there's all these pools of money that exist in the world that are willing to pay for good education, but it takes an investment. It takes a couple of years to realize that investment. And I wish we as a society were able to make those long-term investments in a clear way. So my magic wand would be that when you go to university, you can see an ROI number, and the government or a company or your own family or yourself, you can make that investment. And I think there's countries like France and the UK that are getting really good at this, at funding really good training as a government, and I think that would be my magic one.
I'm so sorry. I need to think for at least more than 10 seconds, and I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay, then people can follow you on Twitter, both, and see if you have any additional thoughts. Thank you very much, Alberto and Tobia. We are out of time. Thank you all.
Davide. Thank you
Thanks.
so much for inviting.
Thanks, everyone.